Hey, my name is Ethan Myers and I'm 24 years old. I live alone in a small two-bedroom house on the edge of Southound, Connecticut, a town so quiet you can hear the river murmur when the wind shifts just right. The house used to belong to my grandfather. He left it to me when he passed 4 years ago, right after I dropped out of community college and realized I wasn't cut out for lecture halls or student loans. It's nothing special. Faded blue siding, a porch that creaks like it's complaining, and a kitchen where the linoleum curls at the corners. But it's mine paid off with the last of Grandpa's savings, and that's more than most people my age can say. I make a living doing whatever needs fixing. Plumbing mostly leaky faucets, burst pipes, the occasional backed up toilet in one of the old colonials downtown. On slow days, I'll swap out light fixtures for Mrs. Gladys next door, or haul junk to the dump for whoever tips in cash. It's honest work keeps my hands busy and my mind from wandering too far back to the things I'd rather forget. My mom lives 3 states away with her new husband. We talk on birthdays, send the occasional text. Dad, haven't heard from him since he missed my high school graduation. The only steady relationship I've had in years ended when my ex Jenna decided a guy with no 5-year plan wasn't worth the rent on her new apartment. She left the key on the counter and a note that said, "I need more than potential." I didn't blame her. I still have the key in a drawer somewhere next to a stack of unpaid credit card statements. I'm chipping away at $20 at a time. Most nights I come home, heat up whatever's in the fridge, and fall asleep to the sound of late-night reruns. The house feels bigger when it's empty, but I've gotten used to the silence. It's predictable. Safe. That all changed on a Thursday in late October when the sky opened up and refused to close. I was halfway through a beer in an old episode of The Office when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but the caller ID said, Southound Towers, penthouse. Fancy building, new construction, the kind of place where residents pay more for a view than I make in a month. I picked up. Hello, hi, this is Marianne Hart from 12B. I have a leak behind the sofa. It's getting worse. Can you come tonight? Her voice was calm clipped, like someone used to giving orders and having them followed. I glanced at the clock, 9:47 p.m., and out the window at the rain hammering the street. Normally I'd say call tomorrow, but the desperation tucked under her politeness was hard to ignore. Give me 20 minutes, I said. I grabbed my toolbox, threw on a hoodie, and drove through sheets of water that turned the windshield into a blur. Southound Towers loomed at the end of Maple Street, all glass and steel glowing like a spaceship against the storm. The doorman waved me through without a word. I guess a guy with a toolbox and soaked sneakers doesn't look like much of a threat. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was silent except for the hum of the motor and the drip of rainwater from my hair onto the marble floor. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a hallway that smelled like new paint and money. Apartment 12B was at the end, the door already cracked open. I knocked once. Plumbing, come in. Marianne Hart stood in the foyer, arms crossed still in the charcoal suit she'd probably worn to whatever meeting had wrecked her day. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, a few strands escaping like they'd given up. She was taller than I expected, maybe 5'9" in the low heels, and even exhausted she carried herself like someone who'd never had to ask twice for anything. Except tonight. It's behind the sofa, she said, turning without waiting for me to introduce myself. I'll stay out of your way. I followed her into the living room. The apartment was massive, open plan, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the river that probably cost more than my house. But it was empty in a way that went beyond furniture. No photos on the walls, no books on the shelves, no throw pillows or candles or any of the little messes people leave when they actually live somewhere. Just a single leather sofa, a glass coffee table, and a half-empty bottle of red wine, breathing beside a single glass. The leak was exactly where she said, a steady drip from the pipe that fed the radiator pooling on the hardwood. I set my toolbox down, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. She stayed on the far side of the room, perched on a bar stool at the kitchen island, staring at her phone like it might bite her. Every few minutes, she'd swipe sigh and set it down again. I kept my head down, focused on the pipe. The silence stretched, broken only by the rain against the windows and the occasional clink of my wrench. When I tightened the last fitting and the drip stopped, I stood up, wiped my hands on a rag, and cleared my throat. All set. Should hold. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed but dry now. Thank you. I'll Venmo you. No rush. I glanced around again, couldn't help it. Nice place. Must be quiet up here. Too quiet. She said so softly I almost missed it. I should have left then. Grabbed my tools, nodded, and disappeared into the elevator, but something about the way she said it, the way the words hung in the air like they'd been waiting years to be spoken, made me linger. You live alone? I asked. She gave a short, bitter laugh. As of last week, yes. The rain pounded harder against the glass. I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was the wine on her breath, or the way the apartment felt like a museum no one visited. Maybe I was just tired of my own empty rooms. Well, if it ever feels too big, you could always crash at my place. It's cramped, the porch leaks, and the neighbor's dog barks at 3 a.m., but at least someone talks back. I meant it as a joke, a dumb throwaway line to cut the tension. I even laughed awkward and too loud in the sterile space. She didn't laugh back, just looked at me with something I couldn't read. Then she nodded once like she was filing it away. I packed up, gave her my card in case the pipe acted up again, and left. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. By the time I got home soaked and shivering, I'd already forgotten the conversation. Or tried to. The next morning I woke to the sound of knocking. It was 6:47 a.m. The rain had slowed to a drizzle-gray light leaking through the curtains. I stumbled to the door in boxers and an old t-shirt, expecting Mrs. Gladys with another casserole or a complaint about her garbage disposal. Instead, Marianne Hart stood on my porch, drenched, a small black suitcase at her feet. Her hair was loose, now wet strands clinging to her cheeks. She wore jeans and a cream sweater that had seen better days. Her eyes were wide, determined, and just a little terrified. "Your offer," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Does it still stand?" I stared at her, brain still half asleep, rain dripping from the eaves onto my bare feet. "What?" She swallowed. "I don't have anywhere else I want to be." I stood there, in the doorway, barefoot and blinking, trying to process the sight of Marianne Hart, penthouse queen, still dripping from the rain on my sagging porch with a suitcase that probably cost more than my truck. The morning air smelled like wet leaves and coffee from somewhere down the block. She shifted her weight, the handle of the suitcase creaking under her grip. "Come in before you catch pneumonia," I muttered, stepping aside. She hesitated just for a second, then crossed the threshold. The floorboards groaned under her boots that looked like they'd never seen mud until today. I closed the door behind her and flipped on the kitchen light. The bulb flickered once, then steadied, casting a warm, uneven glow over the clutter. I suddenly wished I'd cleaned up yesterday's takeout containers, a pile of bills on the counter of the sofa with its permanent dent where I slept most nights. Marianne set the suitcase down gently, like she was afraid it might bruise the floor. She took in the room, the mismatched chairs, the ancient radiator hissing in the corner, the single framed photo of Grandpa and me at the lake when I was 12. Her gaze lingered on the photo longer than the rest. "I can pay rent," she said, pulling an envelope from her coat pocket. 3 weeks. Cash. That's all I need. Quiet. A place to think. I rubbed the back of my neck, still half convinced this was a dream. "You don't have to, I insist." She placed the envelope on the counter. 5 crisp hundreds. More than I made in a good week. I'm not here for charity. I wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes, steady, almost defiant, stopped me. "Fine. Guest room's down the hall. It's basic." She nodded, picked up the suitcase, and disappeared around the corner. I heard the door click shut, then nothing. No footsteps, no unpacking, just the soft patter of rain on the roof. That first week we were ghosts in the same house. I'd leave before dawn for jobs: Mrs. Lang's dishwasher, the bakery's grease trap, a rental on Elm Street, with a toilet that wouldn't stop running. I'd come home after dark, boots caked in mud, and find the kitchen light on a plate of something covered in foil on the stove. Chicken and rice, lasagna. Once a steak so perfectly seared I almost cried. No note, just food. Marianne stayed in her room most of the time. I'd hear the shower running at odd hours, the creak of the floorboards when she paced. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her through the crack in the door, curled on the bed, with a book hair loose, wearing one of my old flannel shirts because her clothes were all dry clean only. She looked smaller without the suit. We didn't talk. Not really. A good morning if we passed in the hall. A thanks for the food mumbled over coffee. I slept on the sofa, blanket pulled up to my chin, pretending the lump in my throat was just from the draft. But the house started to change. One morning I came downstairs and found the pile of bills neatly stacked, a rubber band around them. The takeout containers were gone. The sink sparkled. I opened the fridge and saw groceries, real groceries. Eggs, milk, a bag of apples. A six-pack of the IPA I liked. No note. That night I knocked on her door. She opened it, a crack, eyes wary. "You don't have to clean up after me," I said. "I know." She paused. "It helps me think." I nodded, not sure what to say. "The flannel looks good on you." She glanced down, cheeks pink. "It was in the dryer." "Keep it." She closed the door. I stood there a long time listening to the rain. The second week the silence started to crack. I came home one evening to the smell of garlic and rosemary. Marianne was at the stove, sleeves rolled up, stirring something in my grandmother's cast-iron skillet. Her hair was down, curling at the ends from the steam. She didn't turn when I walked in. "Hope you're hungry," she said. "I made too much." I dropped my toolbox by the door. Starving. We ate at the table, actual plates, not paper. She'd found the good napkins, the ones I saved for Thanksgiving. The chicken was tender, the potatoes crispy. We didn't talk much, but it wasn't awkward anymore. It was easy. After dinner she washed, I dried. Our hands brushed over a plate. Neither of us moved away. "You sing when you think no one's listening," I said, breaking the quiet. She froze, sponge mid-scrub. "You heard that Fleetwood Mac. Landslide. You've got a good voice." She laughed, soft, surprised. "I haven't sung in years." That night I heard her again. Through the wall. Not loud. Just enough to carry. I lay on the sofa, eyes open, listening to the notes drift like smoke. The third week the house felt different. Warmer. The radiator still hissed, but the air didn't bite as much. I came home to find the broken shelf in the hallway fixed perfectly level, screws tight. Marianne was on her knees. Toolbox open, hair tied back with one of my bandanas. "You didn't have to," I started. "It was crooked," she said, not looking up. I couldn't stand it. I crouched beside her. "You're good with your hands. Used to build furniture prototypes before the boardrooms." She tightened a screw. Muscle memory. I watched her work. The way her brow furrowed in concentration. The way her fingers moved with precision. She wasn't the woman from the penthouse anymore. She was here. That night I knocked on her door again. She opened it fully this time, leaning against the frame. "Why'd you really come here?" I asked. "You could have gone anywhere. A hotel. A friend." She looked at me for a long moment. "Because you were kind without knowing my resume." "You didn't ask who I used to be." I swallowed. "And who are you now?" She smiled, small real. "Still figuring that out." I nodded. "Take your time." She closed the door. I stood there, heart thumping against my ribs like it wanted out. The next morning I found a note on the counter. Not the envelope kind, just a post-it on the coffee pot. "Thanks for the quiet." I stuck it to the fridge, right next to the photo of Grandpa and me. The 3 weeks turned into a month without either of us saying a word about it. The envelope of cash stayed untouched on the counter, pushed behind the cereal box like a relic we'd both forgotten. Marianne kept cooking, and I kept eating. The house smelled like garlic and thyme most nights, and the radiator's hiss became background music instead of a complaint. I stopped sleeping on the sofa somewhere around week 5. The guest room door stayed cracked open, and I'd taken to leaving my boots in the hall instead of by the door. Small shifts, nothing dramatic, just the slow erosion of boundaries neither of us had named. One Tuesday in November, I came home to find the living room lamp rewired. The old brass one Grandpa swore was vintage, but really just flickered like a dying firefly. Marianne was on the floor, legs crossed, surrounded by wire strippers and electrical tape. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Figured you'd blow a fuse eventually," she said, twisting a cap onto a fresh wire. "This thing was a fire hazard." I dropped my keys in the bowl. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." She clicked the lamp on. Steady warm light filled the room. Better. I stood there watching her pack the tools away with the same precision she used to stir sauce. Her hands were stained with copper dust nails, short and clean. She'd stopped wearing the diamond studs sometime in October. Now her ears were bare, small gold hoops catching the light when she moved. That night we ate shepherd's pie and watched Before Sunrise on the ancient DVD player I'd salvaged from a curb pickup. She sat on the couch legs tucked under her plate, balanced on her knee. Halfway through, Jesse and Celine started arguing about time, and Marianne laughed. Really laughed, head back, the sound bouncing off the walls. What I asked? Nothing. Just, I used to watch this in boardrooms between meetings, on mute, with subtitles. She wiped her mouth with a napkin. Never thought I'd eat pie off a paper plate while doing it. I grinned. Welcome to the other side. She looked at me, then something soft in her eyes. It's not so bad. The next morning, I found the hallway rug re-centered, the one that had been crooked since I moved in. She'd even vacuumed the edges. I didn't say anything, just poured her coffee before I left for a job in the next town over. The habits piled up like snow against the windows. She started leaving the bathroom door open when she showered steam, curling into the hall, the faint scent of her lavender soap mixing with the pine cleaner I used on the floors. I'd catch myself pausing outside, listening to the water, then shake my head and keep moving. She left her books on the coffee table, design magazines, a dog-eared copy of The Architecture of Happiness, a novel with a cracked spine. I left my work gloves on the radiator to dry. She moved them to the hook by the door without comment. One Saturday, the ceiling fan in the kitchen gave up. It sputtered, wobbled, then stopped dead mid-spin. I was on a ladder with a screwdriver when she walked in, arms full of grocery bags. Need a hand, she asked. Hold the ladder. She set the bags down, kicked off her shoes, and braced the aluminum frame. Her hands were steady fingers, cool against the metal. I unscrewed the motor housing, dust raining down like dirty snow. You know, she said, looking up at me, I once fired a VP for missing a deadline on a fan prototype. Cost us 6 figures. I snorted. Hope this one's cheaper. She smiled. Definitely. We got it running again in 20 minutes. She handed me tools without being asked, anticipated every reach. When the blades whirred to life, she clapped once, sharp, delighted. I climbed down, and our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. That night, she cooked risotto. Real risotto, 40 minutes of stirring arborio rice white wine from a bottle she'd found in the back of my pantry. We ate at the table, candles she'd dug out of a drawer flickering between us. The fan spun lazily overhead, pushing warm air in slow circles. She told me about her ex-husband. Not the whole story, just pieces. How he'd proposed in a restaurant with a string quartet. How he'd stopped looking at her during board meetings. How the last time they spoke he'd said, "You're not the woman I married," like it was her fault she'd changed. I told her about Jenna, the note, the key, the way I'd sat on the porch after she left, staring at the empty driveway until the sun came up. We didn't cry, we didn't hug. We just sat there, the fan humming, the candles burning lower. Later we walked down to the river. The path was slick with leaves, the water black and glassy under the streetlights. She wore my old denim jacket. It swallowed her sleeves, rolled 3 times. We didn't hold hands, but our arms swung in rhythm, knuckles grazing every few steps. She stopped at the bench by the old mill. I used to run here, she said, before the divorce, 5 miles every morning. Thought if I kept moving, nothing could catch me. I sat beside her. And now I'm standing still. She looked at me, and it doesn't feel like falling. I reached over, brushed a leaf from her hair. She leaned into the touch just slightly. Her hand found mine on the bench fingers, threading without hesitation. We stayed like that until the cold crept through our clothes. Back home she made cocoa. Real cocoa, milk, chocolate, a pinch of chili. We drank it on the porch, wrapped in the same blanket. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, sharp. She rested her head on my shoulder. I didn't move. Inside the house felt different. The walls had stories now. The kitchen table had scars from her knives. The hallway smelled like her soap and my sawdust. The guest room door stayed open. My boots lived in the hall. The envelope of cash was still on the counter, but neither of us mentioned the 3 weeks anymore. One night, I came home to find her asleep on the couch, book open on her chest. The lamp cast a soft circle of light over her face lines, smoothed mouth slightly open. I stood there longer than I should have, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. Then I grabbed the throw from the armchair, draped it over her, and turned off the light. She stirred. "Ethan, go back to sleep." She didn't. She sat up, hair mussed, eyes heavy. "Stay." I hesitated, then sat on the opposite end of the couch. She scooted closer, head on my thigh, like it was the most natural thing. I rested my hand on her shoulder, thumb tracing the edge of the flannel. We didn't speak. The fan spun overhead. The house settled around us. Somewhere between the cocoa and the quiet, the corners of the house stopped feeling like mine alone. They felt like ours. By the time December rolled in, the town had started to notice. Southound's gossip traveled faster than the river after a thaw, and a woman like Marianne, tall-polished, driving a silver Audi that looked out of place on my gravel driveway, didn't go unseen. Mrs. Gladys cornered me at the mailbox one morning, her curlers still in despite the hour. "That your girlfriend, Ethan? The one with the fancy car?" I fumbled with the junk mail. "Just a friend. Renting the spare room." She raised an eyebrow so high it nearly touched her hairline. "Friends don't cook dinner every night and fix your porch light." I muttered something about plumbing discounts and escaped inside. Marianne was at the kitchen table, laptop open, typing furiously. She looked up when I slammed the door harder than intended. "Everything okay, neighbors?" I said, dropping the mail. "They think you're my sugar mama." She laughed, short, surprised. "Let them. Keeps the Jehovah's Witnesses away." But the questions kept coming. At the hardware store, Mr. Patel asked if I was settling down. At the diner, the waitress slipped an extra pancake onto my plate and winked. "For the lady at home." I stopped correcting them. It was easier than explaining something I didn't have words for. Marianne didn't seem to care. She'd started wearing my hoodies to the grocery store, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. She waved at Mrs. Gladys like they were old pals. She even helped Mr. Patel carry mulch to his truck one afternoon, sleeves rolled dirt under her nails. The town didn't know what to make of her, but they liked her anyway. Inside the house, the lines blurred further. Her toothbrush lived next to mine. Her coat hung on the hook by the door. The guest room bed stayed made, but she hadn't slept in it for weeks. We didn't talk about it, we just moved, like planets adjusting orbit without noticing the gravity. Then the call came. It was a Tuesday, gray and cold. I was under the sink at the bakery, elbow deep in grease, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. When I finally crawled out, hands black, there were 7 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail. I played it on speaker while wiping my hands on a rag. "Ms. Hart, this is Victor Lang from the board. We need to discuss your resignation. The shareholders are concerned. Your absence is affecting morale. We're prepared to offer you your old position, full authority, increased equity, but we need you back in the city. Now. Call me." I stared at the phone. Marianne was in the living room, curled on the couch with a book. She hadn't heard. That night, she didn't cook. She paced instead, phone to her ear, voice low and sharp. I caught fragments, image optics, liability. When she hung up, she stood at the window, staring at the river like it might give her answers. "They want me back," she said finally. "Tomorrow. Emergency meeting." I nodded, throat tight. "What do you want?" She didn't answer, just turned off the light and went to bed, my bed, but she faced the wall. She was gone before I woke up. I spent the day on autopilot, fixed a boiler in a basement that smelled like mold, replaced a faucet for a couple who argued over the color, drove home with the radio off the silence, louder than the engine. The house was dark when I got there. No lights, no smell of garlic, just the radiator hissing like it was mocking me. I sat on the porch steps, smoked a cigarette I didn't want, and waited. The clock ticked past midnight. 1, 2. I didn't sleep. At 3:17 a.m., headlights swept the driveway. The Audi pulled in, slow tires crunching gravel. Marianne stepped out, heels in one hand, hair loose and wild. She looked exhausted, like she'd aged a year and a day. I stood. "How'd it go?" She dropped her shoes by the door. "They offered me everything. Corner office, 7 figures, a driver. She laughed bitter. They said living here was erratic behavior, that I was throwing away my legacy. I swallowed, and she looked at me, really looked. I told them I'd think about it. 48 hours. The air between us crackled. I wanted to say stay, wanted to say don't, wanted to say something that wasn't pathetic. Instead, I went inside, grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, and handed her one. We drank on the porch, the cold biting through our clothes. She leaned against the railing, bottle dangling from her fingers. I used to think success was a scoreboard, she said. Titles, stock prices, applause. She took a sip. Now I think it's this. She gestured at the dark house, the river me. But I don't know how to be this person full-time. I nodded. You don't have to decide tonight. She turned to me, eyes wet but steady. If I leave, will you hate me? I set my beer down. I'll hate the quiet. She laughed a broken sound. I'll miss the way you leave your boots in the hall, and the coffee you make too strong, and the way you hum when you think no one's listening. I stepped closer. Then stay. She shook her head. It's not that simple. We stood there, inches apart, the space between us heavier than the river. She reached out, touched my cheek, thumb, brushing the stubble fingers cool. Then she dropped her hand. I need to pack, she said. I helped. Folded her sweaters, zipped her suitcase, carried it to the door. Every movement felt like a countdown. That night we ate in silence. Leftover lasagna cold. She picked at it. I pushed mine around the plate. When the dishes were done, she stood in the hallway, suitcase at her feet. I should go, she said. I nodded. Drive safe. She opened the door, then stopped. Turned back. Ethan? Yeah. If I come back, will you still be here? I looked at her, really looked. The woman who'd fixed my lamp, cooked my meals, slept in my bed without asking permission. The woman who'd made my house feel like a home. Where else would I go? I said. She smiled, small and sad, and walked out into the dark. I didn't sleep. Just sat on the porch until the sky turned gray, the river mist rising like ghosts. The next morning I left before the sun was fully up. The air was sharp, the kind of cold that gets under your skin and stays there. I had a job at the old mill replacing rusted pipes in the basement, so I threw my tools in the truck and drove off without looking back. The house felt too still, the porch light still on from the night before. I didn't turn it off. The day dragged. I crawled through cobwebs and sludge hands' numb mind, replaying Marianne's face in the doorway. Her suitcase. The way she'd said my name like a question she already knew the answer to. By noon, I'd snapped at the foreman for nothing. By 3, I'd dropped a wrench in a puddle and didn't bother fishing it out. I got home just after 6. The sky was the color of wet slate, the river churning brown and fast. The Audi wasn't in the driveway, the porch light was off. I sat in the truck for a long minute, keys in my hand, staring at the empty space where her car should have been. Then I went inside. The house smelled like nothing, no garlic, no coffee, no lavender. The envelope of cash was gone from the counter, the post-it with her handwriting. Thanks for the quiet was still on the fridge, but the corner had curled. I opened the fridge out of habit. Her apples were still there, starting to brown. The IPA was gone. I walked down the hall. The guest room door was open. The bed was made corners tight like a hotel. Her books were gone. The flannel shirt she'd worn was folded on the chair sleeves neat. I picked it up, held it to my face. It smelled like her soap and my detergent. I set it back down. The kitchen table had a note, not a post-it. A full sheet folded once. Ethan, I took the 6 a.m. train. The board meeting's at 9. I don't know what I'll say yet. Thank you for the porch light. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, put it in my pocket, and went to the porch. Sat on the steps where we'd drunk cocoa. The river was loud tonight, rushing over rocks like it had somewhere to be. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just sat there, hands in my lap, watching the dark. The cold crept in, but I didn't move. Hours passed. Maybe. The streetlights buzzed. A dog barked down the block. I thought about the first night she'd cooked, how she'd burned the garlic, and laughed like it was the best mistake she'd ever made. I thought about the way she'd fixed the fan, the way her hands had moved, like they knew exactly what they were doing. I thought about the night she'd fallen asleep on my thigh, her breathing soft against my jeans. I thought about the space she'd left, not just in the house, in me. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the porch light flickered on. I blinked, squinted. The Audi was back, parked crooked like she'd pulled in too fast. The driver's door opened. Marianne stepped out. No heels, no suit, just jeans, my old denim jacket hair, loose and wild. She had a paper bag in one hand, a key in the other. She looked at me, eyes red but clear. "I couldn't do it," she said. I stood. The meeting I didn't go, she walked up the steps slow. I got to the station, bought a ticket, stood on the platform. And then I thought about the way you leave the coffee pot half full so I don't have to make it in the morning. And the way you hum when you're fixing something. And the way this house smells like sawdust and thyme and home. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the tear tracks on her cheeks, close enough that I could smell the rain on her jacket. "I called Victor from the platform," she said. "Told him I'm done. Not resigning.